This is interviewer Kim Rivers for the Samuel Proctor Oral History Program and Florida Park Service. Today is May 26th, 2024, and we're here with Jon.
Jon Kay.
Jon, do you mind saying where you were born and when, please?
Okay, I was born September 22nd, 1966 in Bloomington, Indiana, and lived in Indiana all my growing up life. And didn't get too far from there, graduated in the next county over, Brown County, Indiana, little town Nashville, Indiana. And that's where I started my life and went to Indiana University as an undergrad.
When did you get to Florida?
When did I get to Florida? Well, there's three answers to that. I came to Florida, went to a small Christian school down in Tampa for my associate's degree, Florida College. And so I came to Florida, and my family always kind of vacationed down here, but I really liked Florida culture and that sort of thing. I was working as a folklorist after I'll talk a little bit about my education because it kind of brings me to White Springs. I decided I wanted to be a folklorist, and I went to Western Kentucky University to get my master's degree. And at Western Kentucky, they were known for their public practice work. And I finished my work there, but during the summer between my first and my second year of my master's, I became a folklorist working in state parks in eastern Kentucky. And so I was working in Bell County, Kentucky. I was interviewing basket makers and bowl hewers and whittlers, old-time musicians, gospel singers, folk healers, ballad singers, all different types of things. And I would take the things that I was finding in the community and bringing them into the park to do demonstrations and concerts and workshops. And I loved that work. I loved doing the research, going out and interviewing people. I loved finding ways to design things to kind of bring into the park and to share with other people. Well, that was a summer contract job. I did that, and then I went back to finish up my degree. I finished up my degree, and I started working with the Kentucky Folklife program, and I produced a large festival, or helped produce a large festival, the Kentucky Folklife Festival, with Bob Gates, who was the festival director. And I wrote signage, and I helped craft schedules, and I learned, took some of the stuff I learned in the park of doing demos and stuff like that, and figured out how can we lay that out in a festival situation. And so I finished my degree, I do some work at area museums, a whole series of contract jobs, and a year-long contract job with the Department of State of Florida comes open to work at Stephen Foster. The Bureau of Florida Folklife had just been dismantled, and they had taken the Folklife program and moved it to Tallahassee with Teresa Hollingsworth and Tina Bukovalis running it. And Teresa Hollingsworth, who was a Western Kentucky University grad, hired me to come down. They wanted me to come for a year, and I said, could you do 6 months? I'll work full-time for 6 months instead of part-time for a year is what the contract was. And they said, yeah, we could do that. So I came down, and 4 months into a 6 or 8 month contract, Park Service converted my position, had a position created. They converted one of the old tour guide positions that were here at the park. He used to have the women dressed up in the antebellum dresses and stuff, doing tours through the museum. They took one of those kind of interpreter positions and they converted it into a folklorist position, a Park Service specialist position. And I did that, went through Ranger Academy and everything doing that. But that's what brought me to work in Florida, and I was here about 7 years. Tell me if I'm talking too much or going into not enough detail or too much detail.
I want you to talk.
Okay.
That is why you're here. So from there, why don't you just keep on going?
Can we go through the history?
Keep on going, your history with the festival in the park.
Well, I think it's important to realize that before grad school and everything, I'd had a profession as a musician. I had been a dulcimer player, played dulcimer festivals, folk festivals all over the eastern United States, and knew a lot about teaching workshops and classes and doing concerts, which were all things that weren't taught to me in grad school, but made me, with what I learned in grad school, combined with my ability to do public presentations, kind of brought those two skills together, especially in like festival and events. So when I was brought to White Springs, my job was to coordinate the craft square. That was it. They built all these beautiful buildings when the Bureau of Florida Folklife was here. All these beautiful buildings intending for there to be demonstrations, and they didn't fund for there to be anybody in those buildings. And so I had to convince people to come out here and to do demonstrations and do programs and that sort of thing. And so I started working with whittlers and wood turners, and we worked with chainsaw carvers, and I worked with this cabin here that we're in, cabin 1, was the quilters studio. And so each Wednesday, Nancy Morgan would come in and quilt with other quilters and stuff. Elizabeth Knight, and I can't think of the other one's name. I know her real well. I'm sure they're all gone now. 20 years later, they were all retirement age. Miss Nancy's gone. But Nancy, one of the first things she did when I came here was said, do you know anything about making palmetto brooms? I said, I don't know anything about making palmetto brooms. What's a palmetto broom? Well, we used to have to sweep our yard and we'd sweep our house. You have to know how to make, if you're going to be a folklorist, you have to know about making a palmetto broom. So we went into Nellie Bly's kitchen and she taught me how to make a palmetto broom. And from that moment on, she became my Florida grandmother. She was special. But there were several people here. So I came in, I was young, I was about 30 at the time. And I came here and I had all this stuff I was supposed to do. I wasn't festival director at all at that point. First time I went to the festival, I just walked around and I was looking for folk artists and trying to convince people to do demonstrations and stuff, and was trying to figure that all out. And so I figured out that if I wanted to make it alluring for people, I had to be able to come up with some way to make it either financially beneficial for them or for them to have some type of recognition or something like that. And so I started organizing these workshops. And so they come in and they demonstrate as a way of kind of recruiting people to take workshops. And then they would do workshops. And I figured out this equation where it was like, you charge whatever the fee is going to be minus the materials, and the park would take 20% and the artist would keep 80%. And that 20% would be for the use of space, and it would be for the use of electricity or whatever, and would be used for gate fee and all of that. And so we would pay out to the park for the people coming into the park. Because for some reason, if people had to pay a gate fee, they didn't want to pay a gate fee to come in to take a workshop. It just kind of didn't seem right to them. So we just had it, we put their name on a list, they come in, and we did all types of hands-on workshops and stuff. And that was one way we were able to get things. And then that little 20% also kind of went into a little slush fund of mine. And then things that wouldn't pay for themselves, I had a little bit of money left over that I could pay for people to do some demonstrations that were special. I remember bringing in Jamaican storyteller, I remember Bahamian storyteller, and I remember bringing in different people to do different things that just didn't make sense. And so I had a little bit of money to do that. And then we started doing these festivals, or not festivals, little retreats. So I was a dulcimer player, so we did a dulcimer retreat. We did a banjo camp. We did an old time music retreat. And those were all things I kind of started. And one of the things I tried to bring to the festival was this idea of like, everyone thinks of the festival as one thing. And I said, the secret is it's really lots of different things. Everyone comes to the festival for something different. If you bring in the people, if you have that one thing that people want, If you bring in Brian Bowers to teach auto harp and to play auto harp, people who are into auto harp are going to come from all over to see Brian Bowers. And so that's a small group, but that's a group you can command. You bring in Malcolm Douglas to do hammer dulcimer. He brings in an audience with him to do that. And so we realized that all these people that nobody had heard of, we bring in, we do workshops during the day, and then we do a concert in the evening. And people would come from all over for those concerts. Whether they want, and they go, we don't know who any of these people are, but because John's invited them, we know they've got to be good. And so it was this really powerful thing. And all of this was happening with the festival. Everyone thought about White Springs and the festival. All this was happening here all the rest of the year round. We also did Rural Folklife Days. That was run by Department of State, but I eventually took that over too before I became festival director. And then I came to know all the old timers that do here, and I wrote a little bit about that in one of my books. But we're talking about festivals, so I'm going to curtail all of the other stuff that we do. I could talk forever about the park beyond the festival. In fact, when I think about my work here, everyone here thinks about me, oh, Jon Kay was the festival director. I always viewed that as just one thing that I did, and wasn't necessarily the most important thing. I directed the festival for 3 years. It fell into my lap. The Department of State, after 9/11, there was a lot of shortfalls and difficulties, and the Department of State said, we're canceling the festival. They laid off Ken Crawford, who was the festival director. They got rid of, what's his name? I'm Facebook friends with him still. Another guy. Sorry. But anyway, they got laid off 2 people that worked with the Folklife program that were primarily tasked with doing the festival. And the folklorists said, we'll continue to do the Folklife area, but we're not doing the festival anymore. And I get a call. Valinda Subic was the park manager at the time, and she was fantastic. And she just really gave me free reign to do a ton of stuff. Let me test out all my ideas. And she was like, they worked, they generated money. Just keep doing it. I remember we had a park manager come, and he started seeing all the programs that I was doing. And he said, well, you need to give me as much money as you're giving John to do some interpretation in the campground and stuff, so for nature stuff, so I can give some rangers some stuff for their reenactment gear and stuff. And they go, we don't give John any money. John makes all of his own money. The Division of Cultural Affairs called me after 9/11, actually, it was during the Culture Wars is what it was, and there was a lot of cutback on the NEA. And they said, how are you able to do all this arts programming? Where are you getting your funding from? And it's like, it's all user pay. It was already a model that the Park Service understood. It was like, I kept the prices really affordable. We didn't make a lot of money, but we just did lots of work that funded itself. And I feel really, really good about that work. Anyway, so the festival was being eliminated on the eve of the 50th anniversary. Of course, everyone lost it. Everyone started writing letters to the governor, to the Secretary of State, all of that sort of thing. And it was kind of wild. I get a phone call. Valinda is out. She was out sick. She was in the hospital, actually. She had, I forget what it was that she had, but she was sick and she was away. And they were the district manager was basically saying, do you all think that you could do the Florida Folk Festival? And I said, don't you think you should be asking Valinda? Well, we'll ask Valinda that, but John, do you think you could you direct this festival? And it's like, oh yeah, I could direct the festival. It's like whether we should direct the festival, that's another question. So they end up deciding that I'm going to become the festival director. The festival director, Martha Nelson took over doing the crafts. Elaine took over marketing and Elaine McGrath took over marketing and kind of volunteers and that side of things, concessions too, I believe. And I was over the schedule and the workshops and working with everyone on that front. And the Department of State continued to do the folklife area, which we ended up having to fund because they didn't have any money to fund the folklife area. And so here we are, the 50th anniversary. I'm coming in, I can't remember the timeline, but I didn't have a lot of time. It was like January and the festival was in May. I had like 5 months to put, or maybe less than 5 months, like 4 months to pull it all together. And there was a rumor that was going around, oh, they don't have to do anything. They just have to work the festival. It was all handed off to them. That was not true. I had to come through. I could look at what was done in the past. I could see, I got boxes of all these applications. They always had people that would go through it. This is the other part. For better or worse, I sat there and I decided by myself, who was in and who was out. I did that all 3 years that I did the festival. And I know there's lots of political reasons why that shouldn't happen, but I think it was also one of the reasons why we had some really good festivals, because I was really able to kind of like look at things. And then we were having a real problem with, we had so many people that once you were in, there was an assumption you were always in. And that became really difficult. And so I kept telling people you needed to lay out and take a year off. Don't worry, we'll let you back in future years. It's not going to do that. But nobody wanted to do that. And so I ended up having to kind of say, this is your turn to be off. And so I cut in some people so we could bring in some new people. Because I, as a Gen Xer, started realizing that there was a generational problem. That it was all people who were baby boomers, and that generation right behind them, there were very, very few of us that were there. And I was trying to find ways of trying to bring in more people. And that was also part of that special thing. Also, I did elder hostel programs here that was one of the main things I came in as, even before I was hired by the state. I did elder hostels all the 6-7 years I was here. So I take over the festival, we do the festival, it's huge. People come out. Of course, you couldn't buy the advertising that the cancellation of the festival and the rescue of the festival did. And I was able to kind of just step into a role where it's the first time, really probably since Cousin Thelma, that a musician performer was actually, because Thelma wasn't a musician, but a storyteller, actually was running the festival and could bring in some of that. And so I felt really good about being able to do that. I never performed at the festival until the very last one. They had me come out, the people gave me a dulcimer that I still play today. Everyone chipped in from the community and gave me this beautiful handmade dulcimer by my friend David Beatty. He'd call me up and I'm thinking about building a dulcimer. What do you think would make a good one? I didn't realize the whole time he was building one for me. And they all did this. I've got this case and it's all signed by everyone from the festival, hundreds of signatures on there. And I came out on stage and I played one song for everyone there, and it was magical. So during my time as festival director, I tried to really bring out lots of different diversity of, not necessarily ethnic diversity or racial diversity. I think that was good. I think the festival always kind of tried to do that, but also diversity of genres, of different musical types, and bringing those things and really trying to beef up the workshops. Because I had this vision that people were going to show up with their instruments and they were going to come and learn to play, because that's what the retreats were, the dulcimer retreats, the banjo camps. It was like, I saw this as being, all those things being a feeder for the festival, and also the festival being a feeder for those things. That all kind of worked around that. I had hoped that someday White Springs would be like a John C. Campbell or Augusta Heritage Arts, that would be a folk school. And people could come and they could learn. There'd be a big festival that happened, but it would be active all year round. And when right before I left, they opened the State of Florida Nature and Heritage Tourism Center. And I thought, wow, it's starting. That was going to be it. So I came down here, worked that contract, got hired in. I was so unsure about staying here. My wife stayed in Kentucky where I'd been working, and she didn't move down here until after I signed on for the full-time job. But then we were here, raised my son in here. And that last festival, everyone always wanted me to hire. There were always two acts that always came to everyone's mind that they wanted to have. Jimmy Buffett. Everybody wanted Jimmy Buffett, and I was like, I don't think that's even doable. And I called Jimmy Buffett's agent one time, and he basically just said, Jimmy's got his own thing that he's doing, and he said, basically, I'm his agent, yeah, but I don't even, I'm not supposed to call him unless someone's offered $1 million. And it was like, yeah, that's not going to happen. And then I called Arlo Guthrie's agent. And I'd been working with Stetson Kennedy. Stetson Kennedy wrote Palmetto Country, Zora Neale Hurston's boss. He wrote a book called The Clan and Mask, just really a legendary folklorist and community organizer and just an amazing writer in person. And he's probably 80 at this point, and he decided that I was okay. And he and I became friends, and I decided I wanted to kind of really celebrate Stetson Kennedy because he was getting up there in years at the Florida Folk Festival. And so I was talking with him, and he kept encouraging me to get Arlo Guthrie. And I said, I don't know that I can get him. And I called, and they told me, oh, you can't do it. Arlo's going to be in Europe. Sorry, that's not going to happen, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, that's too bad. Can you tell him that I really wanted to do a thing with him and Stetson Kennedy called Remembering Woody? Because Woody Guthrie lived with Stetson Kennedy and they would do these like KKK drills where they would, like, in case the KKK stormed Belutha-Hatchie, they could respond to it. Anyway, I get a call back, and he said, well, he actually said he could shift some things a little bit and he could do it, but it's going to be costly. And I think it was $18,000 to bring Arlo Guthrie here. And so I said, well, that's great. I said, but I'm not sure that we can afford that. And they said, Arlo really wants to do it, but he really can't do it for anything less than that. I said, well, let me see. We'd never paid anything like that before. I think the year before, I brought Norman and Nancy Blake for like $3,000 or something like that. They never really told me how much money I had. I didn't have a budget. It was just like, you had to ask. And it was always painful because it was never real transparent. It's like, yeah, we can get this from here. Can you tell us? And so they gave it to us. And I figured out that whatever the big headliner act charged, if you had good weather and everything was great, you would recoup that. If you did your job promoting it and that sort of thing. We had probably the biggest crowd we'd had in years and years and years at the festival that year. I never know how many the crowds were back then. They used to say, there's 30,000 people. I don't think there ever were 30,000 people here. They started counting people like 4 and 5 times, part of this stage and that stage and different things. So I don't know how many people were at the festival back then. But it was, he came, and it was a lot of people. A lot of people were here. I mean, 4 times what's here this year. It was a lot of people. I remember we were doing the stage with Stetson Kennedy, and I had Arlo with me in the golf cart, and we're talking and stuff. And he's having a nostalgic thing because he had done a concert here in the 70s, I think. And we're riding there, and they take him over there, and he just kind of grabs his guitar. No one realizes who it is, and he kind of steps through the thing, and he does this whole narrative stage. And after with Stetson, and it's just really wonderful. The two of them just having a conversation about Woody Guthrie, and that's archived at the archive. It's on what I call the heritage stage. Anyway, afterwards, he grabs his guitar and tells Stetson goodbye, and he leaves out and he gets into the thing, and all of a sudden we're just rushed by people, and people are start talking to him. And then all of a sudden I'm looking around, like people are pressing in from all sides. I mean, I'm talking, there are hundreds of people around us, and we're in this golf cart. And he goes, I go, are you ready to go? He goes, I think we better go. And I said, I'm backing up. Everyone, I'm backing up. And I put it in, and it starts beeping. I'm backing up. And I start backing up, and it's just like Moses in the Red Sea, you know. All of a sudden, people start moving out of the way a little bit. But it was like, and Arlo turned to me and he goes, that was kind of intense. It was just really, really funny. But I remember my son, he would have been not quite 3 at that point, at that festival. And him just dancing to Arlo Guthrie and just loving that, and that was magical. Yeah, so those are some of the things I can remember from the festival. There's lots of, that last festival I did in 2004. So I did 2001 to 2002, 3, 4. I think I did 3 festivals, and it was a good run. But that last festival, one of the cool things we did was, I was talking with Bob Stone, who has been part of the community here. He's the one that did the sacred steel work. In fact, he and Orman Loomis, I can't remember which one of them. The reason it's called sacred steel, that's not from community. That's what they called the work that they were doing, how they described it, and it kind of created a whole genre. It was just church music for them before, and that's it kind of created that. And so I was Orman Loomis and Bob Stone. Anyway, I think Bob and I were talking. There's been these annual gatherings for a long time of the Sacred Steel Convention, and the idea was like, well, why don't we do the Sacred Steel Convention at the festival? I said to him, and it's like, oh no, it'd be too loud. But there was the old community center, the old WPA era building outside. I said, well, we can put people over there, and because the sacred steel was drowned out everything. It was always so loud. And so we put people over there, and it was huge. Of course, that space was free. And the black community came in, and it was like really well supported. And Alvin Lee and I worked together on that. And one of the great legacy things that I had nothing to do with its success or anything. Alvin Lee took that on and kind of really made that into a part of the festival that now 20 years later is just really beautiful. I know that's where my son is right now. He's enjoying churching with the lap steel players. So, what else can I answer for you?
Well, you were gone a long time. I don't remember where you said you went.
I went to Indiana. So the reason I left the festival, I'll do that. They created a position when I came here for a park service specialist, and that was to coordinate the craft program. Then I started doing all this other stuff, events and exhibits and different things. I'd lead elder hostel. I sometimes did special tours. I did these. I coordinated at the end the Rural Folklife Days after the Department of State stopped doing it. Then I also did these what I called folklife immersion projects, where a school could come up with the money, and we'd just program a Rural Folklife Days for their school in particular. And it was like the same type of price per head as what we would have been charging anyway for a school group to come. And most of these older adults that I was working with, they wanted to share what they knew. And so if I could throw $100 their day away for the day, they were thrilled. And so I figured out what that would cost, and we started doing those. I think I did 15 or 20 of those over a couple of years. And so I was doing lots of these things, but when the festival fell in my lap, my job didn't change. Martha's went from being a park, I think she was just a ranger, to being a park service specialist. Elaine I think got moved to an assistant. They created a second assistant manager position or something like that. I think I could be wrong about all this. There were lots of people who got to move up, and I just stayed the same. And it was like, wait, this isn't right. And I'll be the first to say the Park Service doesn't pay very much. It's a lifestyle thing. And I love the Park Service. And I think it should be, I think they need this, and they're going to be looking for a new festival director now. And they need to hire somebody who understands folk life and who understands music and can do this. And you're not going to get that for someone at, $40,000 a year. It's just not going to happen. I'm thankful for the time that I had here. It prepared me for the work that I do. People have been asking me as I walk around the festival, any chance you'd come back and run the festival? And it's like, no, you couldn't afford me at this point. It was great to be here. It was a beautiful experience that I had here. And I'm thankful for all that the Park Service did for me, but it's hard. It's hard work, and it doesn't pay well. There's a lot of good feeling that comes from it, but it's really hard. And so a job came open as the state folklorist of Indiana, and I was able to move back to a mile away from where I grew up. And so I moved back home, and I see people I went to grade school with. I converted my position 3 or 4 times, and now I'm a professor. I'm teaching people. I think I've trained like 8 different state folklorists at this point. Dom, who's the state folklorist here in Florida, Dom Tartaglia, he was one of my students. He was my graduate assistant. I trained him. I was telling Elaine, I have lots of students who could come and do this type of work. We just have to make it to where they want to come do this type of work. So that was the reason I left. It was time for me to move on. I would have loved to have stayed, but I had to keep moving forward. I tell people my life has been a slow shuffle forward, and this was just one of those wonderful moments in time. But it was just a moment in time. A great 6 years of my life. But I'm so glad I went back to Indiana and got to do the work there that I do.
So you were gone something 10 years.
I was gone 19 years. Much of that I was running. I was a state folklorist of Indiana. I still am. Or there's not a title state folklorist like there is in Florida, but I operate the state folk life program, and based out of Indiana University, and I'm a professor. And so I teach a summer class. And during the pandemic, I converted my summer class. I recorded all my lectures and made them these really polished video modules. And I used the delivery system that the university has for creating online classes. I converted it into a long online class. So now I still have to work the class, but I can do it asynchronously from a distance. And so last year was the first year I was able to actually come to the festival after so many years of teaching when the festival was going on. When tonight I'm gonna have to start grading a big old stack of digital papers, that I put off for too many days because I've been enjoying the festival. So that was the reason. There was no reason why I didn't come back to the festival. I really hoped I would. Actually, I really thought that it would be something that would be, we'd just come to Florida every year and go to the festival. That would be kind of nice. So I came last year. The weather was beautiful. And Elaine came up to me when she saw me. We hugged each other. And you have to remember, Elaine and I, we were both here at the Park Service long before I became festival director. We worked together on all those different events, So it wasn't like she was just the festival director after me. In fact, there was a woman that came in short-lived between the two of us. Wendy, yeah. Welch. And that was the second folklore. She was a Newfoundland grad that they had in there. And for some reason, I don't think it worked out well. And so Elaine came in and took it over. And I think Elaine's done a great job. As a folklorist, I always say, we need a folklorist here at the park. It's the State Folk Culture Center. There needs to be somebody trained in folklore. doing that work. And there's so many great young people who are looking to do this type of work that, they could be doing internships there for people. There's a ton of stuff that could be done around this that I would love to see happen. But I think Elaine's done great. So I don't say all that we need to have a folklorist as a way of dissing on her. It's just my worldview of saying it'd be really great if there is a folklorist, maybe one for the whole park system, to recognize the rich traditions in the state that are associated with public lands and natural resources, issues of sustainability. There's a strong need. I've never liked the idea of there being one state folklorist. There's enough work for a whole team of folklorists in the state. In fact, back in the 70s and 80s, there was the Bureau of Florida Folklife. And it'd be great if we could go back to a model where there are people who are looking at how we can support communities, deal with some of the difficult issues, because traditional arts, I was talking about this in my workshop yesterday, traditional arts are a reparative practice. They're a way for us to deal with the things that ail our communities, the struggles that we face as both individuals and communities. You think about quilting and wood carving, playing music together, community dancing. All of those things are things that bring us together, that putting us into dialogue with each other. They're all those things that support family and support intergenerational connections. So the idea of just folklore or heritage, blah, 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 that's all true and that's all great. But we now, with all the crisis and aging, with the feelings of isolation, loneliness, and helplessness, boredom that many older adults, drug addiction, invasive species, climate change, folklorists are needed now more than ever. And I really think that the State Folk Culture Center and the state park system should really think about how they could leverage having a folklorist to kind of help communities through state parks. So, my little preachy moment, sorry about that.
I like your soapbox. This is the 72nd annual Florida Folk Festival. And folks have different levels of concern about how it will survive. Could you address that a little?
Yes, I can. I don't know that I should, but I guess I can.
Up to you.
I was the director that was brought in when the festival was zeroed out. It was done away. The budget was gone. The Steinbrenner donated, I think it was $50,000 to kind of help us. Was it George Steinbrenner? Is that the name? Yeah, he donated the money for us. I remember, and that we actually, I think we ended up spending a lot of that on like marketing and stuff like that, rather than the arts, which is questionable. But we're at the 42nd. There was concern back with the 50 that it was going to go away. There's been concerns every few years that it's going to go away. This is not going to sound good. We are witnessing, my other area of specialty that since I left here and it grew from here is arts and aging, really working with older adults. I do a lot of work around that. And we are witnessing a great graying of the world, especially in the United States, it seems to. And for us here, there are going to be lots of things that are supported by, right now are still supported by dozens of people who are doing volunteer hours and willing to do things for less and less and less. There's going to be lots of things that maybe will go away. The only way that this is going to survive is going to take two things. I hope it survives either way, but I think two things that would be really central is one, reaching out to that generation. So many times we think about, we have to get the Gen Xers or the millennials involved. You really need the Gen X. You don't need Gen Z necessarily. You need those people who are going to be willing to step in. And the problem is the baby boomers, it was different for them. they had a different experience with it than the generation right behind them. So this group that's just now getting ready to enter into retirement age, many of them don't have the same savings. They don't have the same resources to do that type of work. And so it's going to take a little bit more to do that. I think that there's going to be a need for some professionalization that's going to have to happen. Coming back to bringing in the folklorist. And going back a little bit to the model that I had where everything was, I was very mindful that the festival had all these different constituent groups and trying to find ways to enlist people in coming. And in some ways, even though, I was the dulcimer player that was here and we did a dulcimer retreat. And for some reason, that's the thing that stuck. When I started teaching dulcimer here, nobody knew what a dulcimer was. Nobody here had even heard of a dulcimer hardly. And I would do these dulcimer retreats a couple times a year, and we get these people that would come in, and then it started doubling in, and now they're bringing in these national acts to come and do dulcimer classes. And I think that's just one example. I'm not saying it should be dulcimer, but what I'm saying is that recognizing the special groups. It could be quilters, it could be wood carvers, it could be banjo, or you've got it with old time fiddling is the other strong thing happening here in the banjo contest. There are these strongholds that are bringing in both older people and younger people. When it's just you have to look for these groups that have intergenerational connections, that they're going to bring people and pass that on here. Blacksmithing might be another, but that's a thing that's got a lot of older people and younger people both involved in it. If you had a hammer-in or something like that here, although this time of year for a hammer-in might be a little bit hot. I know, it's amazing. So I think trying to niche down and trying to look, what are the things around us that have those intergenerational components or cross-generational components to them would be really important. Because it's going to become harder and harder. I mean, we're already seeing the writing on the wall. There's going to be some budgetary shortfalls. We're seeing this eclipsing of the baby boomer generation that kind of grew up on this type of music. The folk revival of the 60s and 70s. We're seeing that start to move past, and we have to envision what's that going to look like after that. So I've been gone for 20 years, so I can't really speak to all of that. They've probably had all these conversations till they're blue in the face and thought all of this stuff more than I have, because I'm not here. But if I was looking around and I was thinking, how would I revitalize that? I'd be looking at the niches. How could I reach specific groups and get them to en masse come and be a part of our community too?
Is technology the enemy here?
Technology is not the enemy, although it can be a problem. Case in point, it's not the enemy. I mean, I have stayed in touch with so many of my Florida friends through Facebook. It's been great. But, you can ask all these musicians and craftspeople and stuff, their biggest hindrance to having an audience or a customer or whatever for their work is not other performers. It's the couch. It's the sitting on the couch watching. And I'll be the first to say, I work hard all day. I get home, I might do a little. I carve wooden bowls. I might do a little bowl chopping or play a little dulcimer or something like that. It's hard to think about going back out, play music someplace or go into a festival on the weekends. It's difficult. So I don't have the answers.
If you got to create your legacy, as far as the Florida Folk Fest is concerned, what would you like that to be?
My legacy. Well, I think I've already had my legacy. I mean, I've been gone 20 years. So the fact that it's still here, thanks to Elaine, that makes me feel good. My legacy is when I walk by and I see Dom Tartaglia doing a folk life area that's just wonderful. You have all these people who are sharing their talents from all over the state, who represent cultures from all over the world. That's from the very first festival was intended to be like that. In 1953, Sarah Gertrude Knott, founder of the National Folk Festival, started this with Cousin Thelma and Zora Neale Hurston and all these people. She envisioned it being a place where we had Cracker Cowboys, we had Seminole, we had immigrant traditions, we had African American traditions. Now, was it perfect back then? No. I remember hearing stories about the kind of the segregation and the difficulty. And you can't get past the fact that Stephen Foster, it's always going to have problems. It's wonderful, but the park is as much about Gone with the Wind as it is really about the South or about Stephen Foster. It's about that nostalgic thing. And it's true. For his time, Stephen Foster was progressive, but it's nothing like our progressive. And I think that he wrote some beautiful songs, but I think that we have an opportunity to really kind of deconstruct. I think the park can be a place to have those difficult, at times, cross-cultural conversations. I mean, I would be trying to make this a park where Black families came to talk about what they lived through, not keep trying to revise how we read Stephen Foster and the park grounds and everything. But I said that when I was here 20 years ago. Of course, I was a white kid from the Midwest that, I didn't grow up around Black people. I knew very few Black people before I came to Florida. And I have to say that was one of the best things, working with Martine Young and Ted Henderson, the checker players, or Ella Taylor and Miss Tommy doing a lye soap, and Sally Jones doing the quilt making, and all these different people. I didn't have that experience before being here, and I have to say that's what I valued most when I left here, was the fact that I got introduced to traditions all over the world that were from here in Florida. I got to know better about the South and about culture and diversity. So you can't fix all of that. I can't fix the park or anything like that. But just for me, I think that there's a great opportunity here to just recognize what we are, what it is, and use it as a lens to have these really important conversations that everyone is having. Everyone is having these conversations right now. But maybe the park's not the place. And that's why I said the professionalization. It's going to take people who are able to facilitate those types of difficult conversations and bring people together, that I think would be really powerful. So I've said way too much about this.
I've been wrapped.
Oh, good. I love this place. I was talking with Flozell Reddick and Belinda Subic yesterday, just in passing. I just saw him, gave him a big hug, and it was like, because I've been gone from here for 20 years, I can remember the rattlesnake in the middle of the festival that was that Kevin Patton and I had to catch, because all these people were around this rattlesnake, and we had to. And Kevin picked it up with his hands. I was holding it down with a stick, and he says, "If you let it go, I'm bit." And we had to put it, and we dropped it into a trash can. It come flinging up out of there, and just like had to catch it a second time. I remembered that just vividly, and I remembered the Flozell accidentally dropping a filing cabinet full of archival stuff on top of me in the tower. And I can remember all of these things that happen here that I haven't thought about in forever. So when I'm here, it's like time folded in, that I can remember some aspects of it. It's like being transported here is really cool to get to think back. But it's also really sad. I think about all the people that are gone, the Curly Deacle and the Nancy Morgan and all the tractor and engine guys and all the Martine Young and Ted Henderson who played pool checkers, these black guys that played these pool checkers. And we're doing the Foodways tour things that we did, and just lots of fun stuff. That it was back before the internet and before people were thinking. I don't know if there's much in the way of archival pieces from that time, even of what we did, which is kind of sad in some ways. But you know, when you leave, you don't know what survives, what doesn't survive. I felt really good about that time in my life. So, what else can I tell you, or not tell you?
I'm just really glad you came back.
I am too. It was a long time. I'm glad I came. I don't think I finished the thought. But Elaine asked me last year if I would consider coming back because she knew it was going to be her last one. And I said I would. I never dreamed that she'd have Zelton and I, my son Zelton, at the amphitheater. And Zelton he's basically started his life here in White Springs and the festival, and he's named after Zelton Connor, an Okefenokee Swamp storyteller who came and performed at the Swanee Storytelling Festival that we hosted here. So my whole life just really, this was a major part of that, a major component. And I'm glad to be here. I always will have fond memories of White Springs and of my time here. It was really a magical time. It was a time when some of the old guard, people that knew Sarah Gertrude Knight and Cousin Thelma and stuff, they were here. So Barbara Beecham, you probably heard a lot about Barbara Beecham. Barbara Beecham didn't always get along with Park Service people. You know, there was the Memorial Commission and then the Park Service, and she had distinctions between the two. And of course, she had been Cousin Thelma's right-hand person, and she had done work with Sarah Gertrude Knott, and she remembered when the Bureau came to town, and she remembered how Sarah Gertrude Knott was kind of squeezed out of the National Folk Festival. She had those memories, and she also remembered that Cousin Thelma kind of experienced the same thing when the kind of professionalized people came in, that, you know, she'd been the grande dame of the festival, and then all of a sudden the folklorists came in, Peggy Bolger came in, and Ormond Loomis came in. And it was like a little bit of it was like we're changing things, you know, at that point. And so I stood on the side, I was able to talk to these people, and I could see what was happening and why that had happened, but I could also see how that was difficult for that generation to do things, and what they also saw as being important, what they thought they were accomplishing, and it was both sides were doing interesting things. So I had people like that helped me, and I remember I think it was the Swanee Storytelling Festival, the very first one. I was supposed to be coordinating the craft program. Of course, I didn't have any money to pay anybody, and I was relatively new, and it was like I'd lined up people and stuff, but for some reason that weekend I think I had one person in one of the cabins, and she was hot. She was mad at me because there weren't craftspeople down here. People were coming to listen to storytellers, and there weren't any craftspeople in the park here, and I just remember listening to her. She was scolding me. And I just said to her, "You're right, I'm wrong. I should have been paying more attention to that. I should have gone out of my way to make sure there were people here. I'm sorry, I'll try not to make that happen again." And she just looked at me. She came up and gave me a hug. And it was just like, from that point on, we were fast friends. Because I admitted when I was wrong and when it was my problem. And you know, and I can look back now and say, I totally get why I didn't have anybody here. I remember my last day, I'm getting ready. We used to do this big breakfast on Monday morning. I don't know if y'all still do that or not. But we used to do this big breakfast, a kind of a debrief. And it was my last day because when the festival was over, I'd already delayed working up in Indiana by 3 months because I knew they wouldn't get a festival director in, and it'd be nearly impossible. My wife hated me for that. So I delayed for 3 months for a job that would have paid me more money to stay here, to work this festival. And my wife still reminds me of that. Anyway, because we didn't have much money back then. We didn't for a long time. Anyway, I remember as I was walking out Monday morning, Memorial Day weekend, and we just had, what they said were 30,000 people here at the festival. Arlo Guthrie, all this stuff, big blowout. And someone comes rolling into the park, and they're stretching their head around. And they go, "What's going on in the park today? Is there anything for us to see? Are there any demonstrators or anything?" And I just smiled, and I went to my car, and we drove to Indiana. It was this idea that, like, no matter, and that's the problem with, I won't say a problem, it's the difficult thing with this type of work is you should have been here yesterday. There's always this idea of, like, you have to keep programming, and that really wears on people, and it's really difficult. And so to think that you're going to get somebody that's going to have this, it takes a team of people, and you could really make this, the pride of the Florida Park Service. You could make this something that people talked about with really very little effort, but it would take some really concerted effort to get the right people doing the work. I could see so much future for here because it is at the intersection of so many things that people are concerned with. And instead of ignoring those concerns, if we start addressing those concerns, all of a sudden it's not our liability, but it becomes our strength because we become the place where we talk about that. So anyway, I've said way too much.
Every time you say that, there's another nugget that's really good as gold.
Well, thank you. And I'm an armchair quarterback. It's so hard. All political reasons why you can't, Florida's a different place. I live in Indiana, another place similar to Florida, but it's a different place. And being able to have these conversations might not be doable here. I don't know. But I hope that this place continues to thrive and do well. And like I said, if you embrace your whole, I think there's so much good that can come from that. Warts and all. But you have to recognize that those warts are part of who you are and come to terms with those warts. I'm going to stop there.
Thanks, Jon.
Thank you. Yeah.